Oh, we are live. Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome to a very, very, very special video. One that I've been looking forward to for quite a while. Talking about a movie that I've wanted to talk about for a very long time. And I really regret not getting to it in my original series that this would have been a part of. Today, as you can obviously see, joined by Ryan from Kaiju Network.
Oh, wait. Brought to you by our sponsor,
Okay, yeah, he's learning.
Cherry Coke Zero.
Safeway Cola, because I'm poor.
Fair enough.
But yes, a word from our sponsor. Oh, Shawnee Boy's already here. Spider-Man come out to play. Today, me and Ryan will be talking about, I'm guessing this is one of your favorite films?
Oh, yeah, this is top 10.
As you saw in part 4 of my top 100 favorite films, this is part of a tie at number 5, I believe. Me and Ryan will be reviewing 2002's Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. And of course, I'm dressed for the occasion. Ryan is not.
PlayStation. There was a great PlayStation 2 Spider-Man game and PS1 Spider-Man game, actually.
So, oh boy, Ryan, what might be your... We have a lot to say about this, but Ryan, what might be your history with this film?
This is an interesting one. I've always felt a weird connection to this movie because it came out, I believe, May 3rd. So, like, literally a month before
May 3rd, yep.
Yeah, it's exactly a month before I was born. So I have like a weird connection with it in that way where it's kind of like at the same time I was born. Damn you. And I got one working up. And this is one of the earliest movies I remember watching growing up. I think it's like this, and I think King Kong 05 are two of the earliest movies I remember watching. And this one got out of all the Spider-Man movies, got the most replayability for me. I don't know what it is about it. I mean, I think like Green Goblin is just like, as I'll discuss later, I have a little bit of problems with it. I just think the costume is fun. I think it's like pretty colorful, and Willem Dafoe is great. I think that's probably the thing that keeps me coming back to this one is probably Willem Dafoe. And after I saw this movie, it kind of spiraled. I mean, I was a huge Spider-Man fan for like the first 7 or 8 years of my life. I watched the 90s animated show, obviously reruns. And then I watched the 2000s one on MTV.
The new animated series,
right,
which is criminally underrated.
It's great, which is canon after this first movie.
Partially.
Yeah.
Partially canon.
The second one kind of throws that away. But yeah, I mean, this movie kind of spiraled into my love of Spider-Man. And although I'm kind of done with the oversaturation of superhero movies, I can still come back to all these movies and have a lot of fun. I think it's very 2000s, by the way.
Oh, yes. As we'll discuss in both our pros and nitpicks, Spider-Man is a very, very, very special film for me in many, many, many ways. I believe this is the very first movie that I ever saw in theaters. I don't know what year Finding Nemo came out in theaters, because I'm pretty sure I saw that in theaters as well.
2003.
Okay, then this was the very first film I ever saw in theaters. I didn't see, well, because partially I was 5 years old when this came out. Okay, Sean, quit quoting the movie. That's our job. There's a good one. Okay. I didn't see any of the hype. I didn't see any TV spots. I didn't see any trailers. I didn't see nothing. Just out of nowhere one day, my dad, this wasn't long after there you go. He's catching up. This wasn't long after my parents had split up, actually. Me and my dad were living in a 2-bedroom apartment. We called it the number 4 apartment because that was our apartment number. And just out of nowhere, my dad decided he wanted to take me to the theater to see a movie I'd never heard of called Spider-Man. I was like, wait, what? What's that? I thought it might have been a monster movie for some reason, but I thought that was weird too because my dad hates monster movies. Like, this is the man that almost literally tried to beat my love of Godzilla out of me. Not literally, well, kind of. Um, no, not literally. But my dad is a very adamant hater of monster movies. But I thought it was like, well, okay. And I never gone to a movie before, so I was like, this seems fun. And so me and my dad sat down. We both had a big bowl of popcorn, and as soon as the Marvel logo started playing on screen, I was a pretty rambunctious kid. But as soon as that started playing and Danny Elfman's music started playing, I was like, I was barely breathing, barely blinking. I did not move an inch. The entire 2-hour run of this movie. This was a literal life-changing experience for myself. And after I saw this film, I was anything and everything Spider-Man. I instantly fell in love with the character of Spider-Man. And when my dad got this on VHS, yes, this was that long ago, my dad actually shelled out money to get me Spider-Man on VHS. And I replayed this movie on a near constant loop for about a year and a half. And I was literally anything and everything Spider-Man. I wanted Spider-Man clothes. I had a pair of Spider-Man shoes that I wore until they were damn near like held together by threads. I had a Spider-Man backpack. I had Spider-Man folders. I was so obsessed with Spider-Man. When my dad started dating my stepmom, for some reason, because me and my brother had bunk beds at the time, I thought it would make me just like Spider-Man if I took a black garbage bag and I tied it to the top post of my bunk beds, and I used that as a web that I would swing from back and forth. It held up surprisingly well because even as a kid, I was kind of thick, but it held up for like 3 or 4 months before it finally snapped. I was absolutely obsessed with Spider-Man. With Spider-Man this and Spider-Man that, Spider-Man this and Spider-Man that. It was also helped that my dad had purchased a VHS, because I don't know why the hell they still have not released this show fully on DVD. My dad bought me a VHS tape that had, I think it was like 4 or maybe 5 episodes of the 90s Spider-Man cartoon show, which fueled my love for Spider-Man even more because I was seeing something other than just the movie. Though I was confused as to why Spider-Man had web shooters, but I still watched it regardless. And also, this was after Spider-Man 2 had come out. I started getting Spider-Man comics in the mail that my grandparents would give to me. I think I got the first 20 issues or so before either it was a special occasion that they were just releasing a handful of the original issues in the mail, or they just stopped ordering them after a certain amount. But I got like the first 15 or 20 issues in the mail, and that even more so fueled my love for Spider-Man. And nowadays, I knew of Batman and Superman, of course, but this was the movie that firmly cemented me as being Team Marvel for a very long time. It's only been in the last 3 or 4 years that I am now firmly Team DC. But that doesn't mean that there are still characters in the Marvel universe that I do love, and Spider-Man is one of the ultimate examples. I've stated in my original, now long deleted superhero binge series, The Incredible Hulk is my favorite Marvel superhero, but Spider-Man is a very, very close second. I am a very big Spider-Man fan. I'm very familiar with his history, his character roster, and of course his villain roster, and of all the various different versions of Spider-Man that have come out over the years. I'm pretty familiar with Scarlet Spider, Kane, Spider-Man 2099, Iron Spider, Spider Girl, Spider Woman. I'm a pretty big Spider-Man fan, and it all leads back to this movie. This movie literally changed my life, and this is what set my interest in superhero films for many, many, many years to come. Anything else to add?
No, you got it. Yeah, I had a Spider-Man backpack too. I was trying to look it up and see if I could find it, but it was like the part of the poster where he's like climbing the wall of the building. I think I had that backpack for like 5 years.
Mine too, before it finally just fell apart. Yeah, I was definitely a Spider-Man fan. How does Spider-Man rank up in your favorite Marvel superheroes?
He's probably number one. I mean, I'm not a huge Marvel fan anyway, but I mean, he's easily number one for me. I mean, that's the thing about Marvel too, where it's like DC, like Batman and Superman are probably the most iconic superheroes, and then Spider-Man's like number three.
And Captain America, and probably Iron Man too.
Yeah, well, now I think it's different.
Well, nowadays, especially with Iron Man. Well, I wouldn't say that for Captain America too, because Captain America has been an icon for 80 years. But especially nowadays, the MCU definitely really reinvigorated his fame and like brought Captain America to a new generation. But that's neither here nor there. And also, me being a Spider-Man fan, I would want to get my hands on any show or movie that was out there, too, growing up. And of course, I was really excited when Spider-Man 2 came out. Even more excited when Spider-Man 3 came out. Miserably disappointed when The Amazing Spider-Man came out until I actually watched the movie. Hellaciously disappointed when The Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out and bombed. And ever since the MCU got his hands on Spider-Man, I've just been kind of checked out, except for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and, of course, the 2 Venom films. So, yeah, I'm a big Spider-Man fan. Anything else to add before we get to the plot?
No, I think we can jump into it.
All righty. Oh, one more thing too. It definitely cannot be overstated that Spider-Man is very influential in the superhero genre as a whole. There was a couple movies before Spider-Man that really kicked the superhero genre. I'm specifically talking about Marvel. Sure, there was the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, but that's for DC. I'm just talking about Marvel. There was some shows in the 90s, like the animated Spider-Man show and the animated X-Men series. But in terms of Marvel, back in 1998, we had the original Blade, which pushed open the doors for Marvel. Then in 2000, we had the original X-Men. That opened the door all the way. But then really with this movie, this is what opened the floodgates. And now this is the movie that convinced studios, okay, Marvel superhero movies actually can be made well and make a buttfuck ton of money. Which this movie did. This movie came out May 3rd, 2002. Which, by the way, I meant to review this movie last week, but I got busy. And yes, May 3rd of this year is the 20th anniversary of this film. It cost $139 million and it went on to make a whopping $825 million in its entire box office run.
Damn.
Making it the third highest grossing film of 2002, the highest grossing superhero film of 2002, and the sixth highest grossing film overall at the time of its release. And Spider-Man is credited for redefining the modern superhero genre as well as the summer blockbuster genre, which hasn't really been touched since Jaws created it back in 1975.
This movie had a lot of development shit too. Like,
yeah. Oh my God in heaven.
I was doing a lot of research into it. Like, I think the rights even go back to like Roger Corman in the 80s at one point, might have had his hands on it. And then obviously James Cameron.
Oh, yeah. So development on a live-action Spider-Man film began way back in the 1980s. This would not be the first time there'd be a live-action Spider-Man, as Ryan knows, as well as I do, back in the late 1970s. Was it the late 70s?
Yeah. I think 77.
There was a short-lived live-action Spider-Man TV series, and over in Japan, there was Toei's Spider-Man show, where Spider-Man would pilot a giant Power Rangers-style robot called Leopardon. But for a live-action Spider-Man film, development on this began back in the 1980s. Filmmakers Tobe Hooper, Joseph Zito, and James Cameron were all attached to direct the film at one point. But this project would languish in development hell due to licensing and financial issues. And progress on the film was stalled for nearly 25 years until it was licensed for a worldwide release by Columbia Pictures in 1999 after it acquired options from MGM on all previous scripts developed by Canon Films, Coralco, and New Canon. Exercising its option on just two elements from the multi-script acquisition. A different screenplay was written by James Cameron, Ted Newsom, John Brancato, Barney Cohen, and Joseph Goldman. Jesus. Sony hired David Coep from Jurassic Park fame to create a working screenplay credited as Cameron's, and David Coep received sole credit in the final billing. Directors Roland Emmerich, Ang Lee, Chris Columbus, Barry Sonnenfeld, Tim Burton, Michael Bay, John DeBont, M. Night Shyamalan. What?
John DeBont, that would have been fun.
Tony Scott, and David Fincher. Jesus Christ.
David Fincher Spider-Man movie.
Were considered to direct. Oh, he probably would have just been a full-on half, like would have been the Earth versus the Spider remake from 2004, more like. All these directors were considered to direct the project before finally Sam Raimi of Evil Dead fame was hired as director in 2000. The script was rewritten by Scott Rosenberg during pre-production and received a dialogue polish from Alvin Sargent during production. And filming took place in Los Angeles and New York City from January to June of 2001. And Sony Pictures Imageworks handled the film's visual effects. It was released, of course, in 2002, received near unanimous praise from fans and critics, made a butt-fuck ton of money, and revitalized the superhero genre, and its legacy was, of course, born. With all that being said... Huh? Oh, I got you. Okay. With all that being said, finally, almost 20 minutes into the review, let's get into the plot and take these off. On a school trip... Oh my God, this is so similar to American Pie. High school senior Peter Parker, played by Tobey Maguire, visits a Columbia University genetics laboratory with his friend Harry Osborne, played by James Franco. Damn. Was this before all the sexual allegations? And his crush, Mary Jane Watson, played by Kirsten Dunst. Jeez.
Oh my god, that was
Not
my 5-year-old crush right there.
Not interviewing a vampire. There, a genetically engineered super spider bites him and he falls ill after returning home. Meanwhile, Harry's scientist father, Norman Osborne, played by Willem Dafoe, hashtag cast as Freddy Krueger, founder and owner of Oscorp, tries to secure an important military contract. He experiments on himself with an unstable performance-enhancing chemical and goes insane, killing his assistant in the process. The next day, Peter finds he is no longer nearsighted and has developed spider-like abilities. He can shoot webs out of his wrists and has quick reflexes, superhuman speed and strength, and a heightened ability to sense danger, aka the famous spider sense. Fuck off, MCU, renaming it to Peter Tingle. Or Petey Tingle. What the fuck? It is so retarded. Fuck you, Disney.
Back to formula.
Brushing off his Uncle Ben's advice that with great power comes great responsibility. Peter considers impressing Mary Jane with a car. He participates in an underground wrestling event to win the money for it and wins his first match against Bonesaw McGraw. But the promoter cheats him out of his earnings. Fun fact, he's given $100 in the original Spider-Man comic. That was the prize. It was win a wrestling match for $100. But back in 1965, I think, or maybe 66, $100 was a fair bit of money. Oh, yeah. Bonesaw is ready. What are you doing up there? Staying away from you. That's a cute outfit. Did your husband give it to you? By the way, that's another pro that I can give this movie real quick. You can probably guess what it is, but whatever. When a burglar robs the promoter's office, Peter allows him to escape in retaliation. I missed the part where that's my problem. Only fair. But in the end, it's not really fair because of what happens. Moments later, he discovers Ben was carjacked, stealing Bruce's car from the original Evil Dead series, because Sam Raimi has to put that damn car in everything he's in, and killed by a robber with a handgun. Peter pursues the carjacker, only to realize it was the robber he let escape. The carjacker flees, but dies after falling out a window.
But it actually wasn't. It was Sandman.
Later on in the trilogy, as we find out. Meanwhile, a crazed Norman interrupts a military experiment by Oscorp's corporate rival, Quest Aerospace, and kills several people. Upon graduating, Peter begins using his abilities to fight crime, donning a spandex costume and the persona of Spider-Man. Jonah Jameson, played wonderfully by J.K. Simmons, publisher, doesn't want to be famous? Then I'll make him infamous. Publisher of the Daily Bugle newspaper, hires Peter as a freelance photographer since he is the only person that provides clear images of Spider-Man for him to sell. Norman, upon discovering Oscorp's board plans to oust him in order to sell the company to Quest, he assassinates them. Jameson dubs the mysterious killer the Green Goblin. The Goblin offers Spider-Man a place at his side, but Peter refuses. They fight, and Peter is wounded. And at Thanksgiving dinner, Peter's Aunt May invites Mary Jane, Harry, and Norman. But during the dinner, Norman sees the wound and realizes Peter is Spider-Man. Thinking the only way to defeat Peter is to attack those special to him, Norman later attacks May, forcing her to be hospitalized. Harry, who is dating Mary Jane, sees her holding Peter's hand to comfort him and presumes she has feelings for him. He's right, but whatever. Devastated, Harry tells his father that Peter loves Mary Jane, unknowingly revealing Spider-Man's biggest weakness. Norman holds Mary Jane and a Roosevelt Island tram car full of children hostages alongside the Queensboro Bridge, inspired by the death of Gwen Stacy storyline, but just replace Gwen Stacy with Mary Jane and have her survive. He forces Peter to choose whom he wants to save and drops them both. Peter saves both Mary Jane and the tram car, and then Norman throws him into an abandoned building and begins to beat the ever-living fuck out of him. When the Goblin says how he shall kill MJ, Peter regains his strength and gains the upper hand, slightly anticlimactically. More on that later. Norman reveals himself to Peter and begs for forgiveness while subtly getting his glider ready to impale Peter from behind, also inspired by the death of Gwen Stacy. Warned by his spider sense, Peter dodges the attack and the glider impales Norman instead.
Oh.
Don't tell Harry.
No, he leans forward.
I can't lean forward. Norman tells Peter not to reveal his identity as the Goblin to Harry before dying. Peter takes Norman's body back to the Osborne house just as Harry walks in and, believing Spider-Man to have killed his father, pulls a gun on him, but he escapes. At Norman's funeral, Harry swears vengeance towards Spider-Man, whom he deems responsible for his father's death. Mary Jane confesses to Peter she is in love with him, but Peter feels he must protect her from the unwanted attention of his enemies, so he hides his true feelings and tells Mary Jane that they can only be friends. Very cringeworthily. As Peter leaves, he recalls Ben's words and accepts his new responsibility as Spider-Man. Who am I? I'm Spider-Man. Thus ending the film. Ryan, what do you think?
Of the plot?
Ow, that hurt.
Actually, because like my memories of watching this, I've been like pretty, again, like I haven't seen it in full in a long time. I actually understood the plot this time, which sounds weird to say. Like when I was younger, I just, even like in recent years, like when I watched it, like when I was like 12, 13, I just like didn't totally grasp all of it. But I was like, oh, entertaining stuff. Okay. And then now Green Goblin and now that, but I think it works. I mean, I think this movie, I think I kind of agree with some people, like maybe the second one's a better story, but I mean, it's kind of like a superhero coming of age. It's pretty much what you expect. And I will say this time, I definitely do notice the subtext of puberty a lot more than I did before. Like, I didn't realize like that Uncle Ben is like, he's like, you're going through changes. And I'm like, oh, he literally thinks that that's what this is. I thought it was, I don't know. I thought it was funny. It's a timeless plot. It's a great, it's a love triangle. Everyone loves a love triangle. Like,
I know.
Like your favorite in, Emiko and in the original Kaiju. No, this plot's fine. It's nothing spectacular. It's just, I don't know. I don't have much to say on the plot. I gotta be honest.
This movie is also definitely influential in the fact that it's one of the first to really solidify the superhero origin story formula.
Yeah.
Which is still felt to this day. Hell, the MCU throws this formula out almost every other second or third movie that they put out. Maybe not so much nowadays. Well, actually, no, still with Eternals and Shang-Chi. But at the time, that really wasn't a problem. But still, looking back, sure, it is the origin story, but it's a well-done origin story. I don't really want to get too much into that because that's actually one of my pros with this film, but it's a well-done plot. It tells Spider-Man's origin. It shows the early days of Spider-Man as a superhero, and it lays the groundworks for other superhero films to come, but also for the rest of its own trilogy to take advantage of. Everyone's well cast. There's lots of good action scenes. There's lots of good emotional and poignant moments. Overall, this movie's plot is very, very well thought out. Thankfully, it doesn't feel like there's 9,000 people making a script for this movie. Like, it doesn't feel disjointed. It doesn't feel like 3 or 4 people wrote this film. Everything's very cohesive, and everything is just put together very well, and everything fits well, nicely together. The plot is very good.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I guess I can chime in and say this. As like cheesy as some of the moments are in the movie, I couldn't help but still, even at this age, be like totally emotionally invested in a lot of the shit. Like a lot of the like, it's Spider-Man, and like I'd get excited. Like it just works.
Yeah.
It just works for some reason, you know. The score helps too, which I'll get to that.
Oh, of course. How many pros do you have? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9 pros for this film.
I have 6.
You can go first.
Okay. So my first one, because it was the first thing that I kind of did these in order of how I saw them, is Danny Elfman's score. I mean, same thing as you said. The it's so much different for some reason. Like seeing the Marvel logo at the beginning of this, it's just a totally different vibe I get from it.
Right? Yeah.
The score, it really hypes you up. But it's like, it's such a memorable score too, because like especially when they played in
my head right now as we speak.
The ending. The ending is such a great use of it too. It's just, it doesn't feel like a very churned out theme like a lot of movies are. Like you can tell that they put a lot of thought into it, and it hits the beats where it needs to hit. And for the beginning, it hypes you up by, you know, it just gets you excited. And like, you know, there's like any good theme, there's like, you know, that's softer moments and there's all these other things. But I mean, holy hell, it's memorable. And do they bring it back in the next 2 movies, or does he do a different theme? Okay. I thought they brought it back.
He may like tweak it around just a little bit to make it sound. It's kind of comparable to what Brad Fiedel does for the Terminator theme in the first 2 Terminator films. It is the same theme, but it was just tweaked around slightly to make it sound a little bit different. But throughout the whole trilogy, they do reuse a lot of this music. But it's effectively done. It doesn't feel lazy because these are all consistently made films. It doesn't feel lazy, but yeah, continue.
I also think it helps the tone of the movie too. Like again, it's a comic book movie, and this was pretty early on, so they were kind of testing the waters. And I think like the score of the movie as well kind of solidifies the tone that they're like, yeah, I mean these are comic book characters, but like this is a serious story. And I
wouldn't say serious per se. It does take itself seriously, but it's never overly serious.
No, yeah, but
it's a good balance of being sort of a little campy because Sam Raimi, Evil Dead, but it knows when to take itself seriously, but never go too far. And right. Sean is saying down in the comments I have a lot of thoughts to say about the score too, but yes, Danny Elfman did the music, and he also did the music for Tim Burton's Batman
and Hulk too, right? Ang Lee's Hulk.
That I don't know.
I think he did.
But I do think there are times where Batman and Spider-Man's music sound a little similar. Probably because he used a lot of the same instruments. But thankfully, even though you can tell it's Danny Elfman, this sounds like its own thing. It doesn't sound like he's just like, Danny Elfman was just being, well, what I did with Batman, I'll just use that for Spider-Man. He still makes Spider-Man's music his own thing. I'm going to look it up myself.
Yeah, Danny Elfman did the score of Hulk.
Damn, really?
Makes sense, because I like that as well.
I like Hulk. I don't like the movie around him.
I think, all right, I can just get to my next pro. I
Yeah,
think the
go ahead.
casting in this movie's excellent. I mean, I think especially you can tell it's really good because it's like one of those things where when they tried to recast these people in different movies, it didn't work. Like for me, it was never the same. And maybe because it's like the first time they did it, it has a little bit of that clout. But I think everyone was perfect. I mean, Jameson's obviously perfect. And I think the one thing it comes down to is like for me with Tobey Maguire is like believability. Like we talked about this a little bit before we recorded. Like I could kind of get into Garfield a little bit. I'm not a fan of Tom Holland, but I feel like
Neither am I.
Tobey Maguire is like the right level of, I can believe that he's like some high school.
Nerdy.
Yes. And I think he fits it perfect. I don't know the actor who plays Uncle Ben, but he's awesome. And like
Oh
this
yeah, of course.
I do like the Aunt May in the Andrew Garfield movies, but I think it's kind of iconic in this one. Um,
Cliff Robertson played Ben Parker. I
okay,
think he's dead now. Yeah, he's dead now.
he was good. And obviously Willem Dafoe. I like Kirsten Dunst. I don't really have any complaints with the cast. I mean, sometimes that can be a complaint for movies, but like I believe everybody in this movie, which is really to its benefit. Um, and I think my next one too, my third one is the tone. I think the tone's great. I mean, it has like the right mix of like, especially with Green Goblin, some over the top stuff, a little bit of cheese in there. Um, but it's also trying to take itself like serious enough where it's like, yeah, we know we're a comic book, but like we're trying to make a solid movie.
Yeah,
It's not just for kids, it's, I mean, although it appeals to a lot of kids, movie has some violent as well as some like even creepy scary moments. I think more than even the other two movies, like especially with Green Goblin, some like the editing gets a little uh psychedelic and weird at times.
that's the influence of Evil Dead because Sam Raimi can just never get away from Evil Dead.
Yeah. Um, there's like a random jump scare with Green Goblin in there when Peter's like falling asleep. Like there's just some random like weird moments in there, which I think the tone has a really good mix of all that stuff. Um, and I think my fourth pro, this is more in comparison to like the MCU movies. I praise the writing in the movie, specifically like it's just a human story. It's not trying to be this like gigantic universe crazy thing. It's just about Peter Parker and it's about his family and his relationships. And I think that's something that the movie does really well. Like even the X-Men movie, it's kind of busy. I think in this one it's the
It's a
writing.
setup movie.
Yeah,
That's the first X-Men movie is nothing but a setup movie.
and yeah, I think that's what's good about this movie is like obviously there were sequels, but and obviously like you'd want to see Peter keep going, but if they didn't make 2 and 3, there wouldn't have been a problem with this movie at all. Like this can be a standalone movie, which I think a lot of people don't know how to do that anymore. So that was also really refreshing.
Well, Hollywood nowadays is just all about franchises, which uh, I'm all about franchises. I love franchises, but it's like what the great Zack Snyder said: you need to shoot all your bullets, which this movie does.
Hmm. Um, my fifth pro is the costumes, or costumes, makeup, whatever you want to put for this. Um,
Costume.
I'm sure you have a lot more to say than me about the original Green Goblin ideas for that design. That was going to be crazy, but
Not really, but we can talk
okay.
about it here. So behind the scenes, originally, so how what people know this, but still, how Green Goblin is done, it's just a guy in a suit. It's in the Green Goblin mask is just a mask. It has this fixed, like mean, snarling goblin face on it. But originally they were gonna do an animatronic Green Goblin mask that would have moved along with like the mouth would have moved. It had movable eyebrows, and I think moving eyes too. I'm not really sure. Yeah, there you go. That's the original design. I'm not really sure why they didn't go with it. I think really the only thing that's kind of shitty about it are the ears because they're just obscenely long. I can only guess maybe it was either too clunky or just too experimental to really pull off properly. or maybe just like shooting with it would have just been too difficult. But I think ultimately it would have been just a little too unnecessary for
It's
what
a
this
little
movie's trying to do.
cartoony, honestly.
It is also a little cartoony, but the Green Goblin is kind of an over the top, like Looney Tunes on crack cartoon character. So maybe that would have been effective.
Yeah.
But still, with what they went for with this movie, it was still effective.
And I think with the design they went with is fine. It's kind of this like armored, kind of like modern thing. I think that works really well. It's also very, very green. It's like the same shade of green. I think that works great. But I think
Mhm.
I like Spider-Man's costume the
It's a
best.
deep emerald green.
Yes, and his like yellow eyes, which is cool as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think Spider-Man's suit in this is great. Like obviously adapting it from the comic. I mean, they changed a couple. I mean, like they changed the web color was black in the comics, and they made it like a silver. The logo was smaller, I think, than in the comics. Like
Mhm.
they
Look a lot more like this one here,
yeah, they did a
except
lot of
this
things
is even smaller.
right. I mean, like they did a lot of things to change. And like the Garfield movies, they tried to be like, oh, we're gonna be comic book accurate. I'm like, okay,
Not even
but
well with Amazing Spider-Man 2, yes, but with the first one, not even close.
um,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think this is an interesting case too, where like this movie became so popular that I think this look almost became like
The
not
new
more
official look.
yeah, it's not even more popular than the original. It just became the new look for Spider-Man. And I think that's just a testament to how good. I mean, because looking at a comic and like I mean, they've done this with Batman a million times. There's a bajillion different interpretations of how he looks. Like it's not easy to get a comic book suit right in live action. And I think they did it right because it could have looked really goofy. That's like always the thing with Spider-Man. It's a weird suit. So I think
Like with what WandaVision did with the comic book style Scarlet Witch and Vision costumes, they just look ridiculous in live
yeah,
action form. You need to have that modern, more realistic spin on them in order to make them
Mhm.
work.
I mean, I
Though
think they toned down the
not
blues
like
too. It's like
what's
navy
up?
blue instead of like very bright blue. Don't they? Isn't the costume like navy blue? Spider-Man's
Kind of
costume.
like a darker, kind of like this, a
Yeah,
darker blue color. Because yeah, in the comics, it's a very, very, very vibrant shade of blue. Um, and they would have stuck out a little bit too much with this, and also would have well, no, and that is an inherent flaw with Spider-Man's costume. It doesn't really adhere to being stealthy because it's red and blue. But still, with the colors, it's a dark red and a dark blue, so that still helps with being stealthy. Um, which I want to say too, to add on to this movie's tone, I could put the tone as another pro too, but I'm not because you kind of just took the words out of my mouth, and we already said this is a good mix of being campy and serious. But two, unlike the Dark Knight trilogy, which goes out of its way to be as realistic as possible to the point, at least in my opinion, where it just becomes boring. It's like King Kong 76. It bends over backwards so badly to be realistic, but the fantasy elements is what really makes that kind of stuff fun. And
yeah.
if you take that away, it just becomes bleak and dreary. This movie is a little bit more realistic, but it still keeps that whimsical charm that makes it fun to watch and makes it engaging while still giving it a modern and updated fresh coat of paint, which I will talk about when I get to one of my pros too.
I mean, yeah. Again, not to tangent, but like some of the moments, I think, like some of the goofy one-liners or some of the shit, like especially like during the freaking parade when he's like bouncing on the giant float, like some of that stuff is goofy, but like if you accept that this is supposed to be a comic book, then it kind of makes sense. Uh, in that
I never
aspect.
really saw that as being goofy. It's
No, I
just
know. It's a funny visual to me.
oh, true. Yeah, I guess it is kind of funny watching Spider-Man bounce on a
like a
giant
like a bouncy
inflatable
house.
balloon of a kangaroo.
Um, and I think I really only have one more pro. And I think the cinematography is really good. Like I think the movie just looks really great. It's well shot. Like there's some of the cool nighttime stuff is like really dark and gritty. Like not even just when he's getting Ben's killer, but like I think my favorite one is like when he's first getting out in like fighting crime and he's taking pictures of himself, and there is a little bit of that like slick felt, like not slick, what I'm looking for, like he's shit, I can't think of the right word I'm trying to look for here, but he's like it's kind of like noirish, it's not exactly a Batman thing, but like it's kind of scary. Like you get like a kind of a vibe from him where he's like, oh shit, Spider-Man's around, like holy shit. So I think some of that works, and I think like just like obviously the way they shoot him like swinging around, because again Spider-Man has like a weird power set, so like filming that must have been kind of like, okay, how are we gonna do this, because he's swinging around and stuff. I think a lot of the like POV and stuff they do with the camera, like it all works really well. And I can't forget to mention like the ending with like the golden hour sunset and he's like swinging around, that stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's so, and the score too in that part is so great.
The score is really what sells that scene, because it's so because movies don't really do this anymore too. Movies don't end with a really good musical, like if you watch a really just like uplifting, just really well made, entertaining film, they never really end with just like a musical montage, especially for like an action movie, or in this case, especially a superhero film, where you just see the superhero going off and doing his thing with his iconic theme. Movies don't really do that anymore. They don't leave you with a good feeling, just like, oh wow, that was a really good movie. I feel really good about myself because of that. Movies don't really do that, in my opinion, anymore.
I mean, yeah, like they could have ended with the cemetery, but they gave us this like 3-minute send off of him, like all these just epic shots of him flying around. It's great.
Well, yeah, Sean here says King of the Monsters ends with that like montage of the Titans going around healing the world with the Godzilla theme. That works too. I'm more so talking about with like superhero films. Aquaman does that a little bit, like at the end of Aquaman swimming around the kingdom of Atlantis. That's cool. That's probably actually the closest example of a modern superhero movie doing that. But still, it's not as common, unfortunately, nowadays. Movies used to do that all the time.
But yeah, no, I think the way the movie's shot, it just looks great. I will say this. I don't have any other place to like say this. I think I thought that they removed this, but I noticed in one of the shots in like the compilation, not at the end, but I think when he was just again like that same scene where he's like first fighting crime, the Twin Towers are in his eyeglasses. And I thought they only had that in the trailer, but I saw it in the movie and I was like, why didn't they take that out? It's like, yikes.
Oh yeah,
I don't know, but this
only
movie
a year later.
I don't know how much they rewrote for some of this stuff, because I mean, obviously I wasn't alive during that time, but like I know even like a lot of music and stuff, there was a lot of like not just censorship, but like a lot of like patriotism and stuff. Like the American flag at the end, they definitely added that as like a last minute thing. The whole New York
people
thing,
bitch about that all the time. More so in Spider-Man 3, but they bitch about that shot in this film too. I don't give a damn. I think it looks cool. Hell, I literally have. Well, probably not a good idea, but I literally have
colors too.
Him hanging from the flagpole, cut out from my original DVD slipcover, just hanging on my wall back here, because it's a cool shot. Like, who the hell keeps bitching about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like bitching about it. It's just something interesting about the movie, like another layer of context, especially like for New Yorkers at the time watching this. They were probably like, yeah, that's nice. Especially the ending where they were like, yo, you mess with us, you one of us, you mess with all of us. It's like,
yeah,
a little cheesy, but hey, it's fine. But no, I mean, definitely a product of its time. Oh god, the trailers for this movie are freaking awesome. They have like that like techno rock 2000 stuff going on. It's great. But no, I mean overall, to wrap up my pros, I mean, I think the casting in the movie is iconic. Like I can't imagine anybody else but Tobey Maguire being the voice of Spider-Man. It's like it's so maybe it's just because I grew up with it, but it's like so perfect to me. Even after watching the animated shows, fucking Neil Patrick Harris, but like
I thought he was okay.
he's good, but it's just not the same. The casting is great. I think the tone is good. It looks good. It's got a couple weak points, which we will discuss, but
Only a couple. Only a couple.
Overall, this movie, I had a lot better of a time with this than I thought I would. I thought it would be more dated than it was, but like I was emotionally sucked into the movie to its praise. So,
yep,
it got me the heartstrings,
as it did me. So I have 9 pros, and pro number 1 is Peter Parker, played by Tobey Maguire. I had never seen anything with Tobey Maguire in it before this, and I don't really. I've only seen. I know of 2 other things that Tobey has been in other than these 3 movies. There was a movie called Pleasantville where he gets sucked into a TV of his favorite show, Pleasantville, and it's all black and white, and his presence brings Technicolor to his world. Had a pretty decent cast. William H. Macy was in it too. And then, of course, he was in, was it The Wolf of Wall Street? Alongside Leo DiCaprio?
Oh, I don't remember.
No,
The Great Gatsby.
That's what it was. Great Gatsby. Those two movies always look so similar to me. Yeah, Great Gatsby. I know he was in that, and I remember actually the hype surrounding that movie. I was like, hey, it's Tobey from. I haven't seen him since Spider-Man 3. Outside of these 5 films, I haven't seen. Well, I mean, of course, in No Way Home now too. Haven't seen Tobey in anything else, but I'm sure Tobey will go to his grave always knowing that he will always be remembered as Spider-Man.
I'm not going away. Keep going.
But he's great. He's so well cast. He strikes the perfect balance. Although I think this aspect of him is done better in the next movie. He has the best mix of looking nerdy, like a 2002 New York geeky high schooler, but he also plays up being the geeky scientific nerd. Again, that's done better in the next movie, especially since he's playing off a scientist in that film. And by the way, apologies if we keep jumping ahead to the next 2 movies when we're talking about stuff with this. It's kind of hard to, because all 3 of these movies are, pun intended, webbed together so tightly. But we're doing our best to just focus on this first film. But still, was he in Tropic Thunder? Ugh, I hate that film. Still though, just Tobey Maguire strikes the best balance of being a nerdy high schooler, as well as being like a heartthrob for the ladies. And he looks great. He looks like a New Yorker. He talks like a New Yorker. He acts like a geek, but he also acts like a really responsible guy. And he just overall, his demeanor and his persona, he just looks like a likable guy. And he also knows very well when to take things seriously, and he does a great job just all throughout the film. Couldn't have asked for anyone else to play Peter Parker in these movies. He does a great job. Pro number 2 is Norman Osborn, played by Willem Dafoe. This movie was my introduction to Willem Dafoe. Haven't really seen him in many other things outside of these 3. I know he was in The Lighthouse opposite Robert Pattinson.
Platoon.
Was he in Platoon?
Yep.
No, I haven't seen Platoon.
He was the one that was killed in like the iconic shot where he's like,
Oh, was that him? Okay,
Yep.
I thought that was Charlie Sheen. What else was he in?
Aquaman.
Oh yeah, he was an Aquaman. Duh. But yeah, this is the movie. I'm sure there's other films that Willem Dafoe will go down for being remembered as, but for me, I will always remember him as Green Goblin. And I will go to my grave saying he should have been Freddy Krueger. If there's not a Nightmare on Elm Street movie that, oh yeah, I know he was in Boondock Saints playing a gay guy, which he actually pulls off being gay pretty well in that film. If he is not cast as Freddy Krueger in a future Nightmare on Elm Street movie, it'll be a crime damn shame. But Willem Dafoe does a really, really good job as Green Goblin. He plays both sides of the coin very, very well. On one hand, he's very warm, he's very inviting, and he's very fatherly to Peter Parker, and in a couple scenes to his own son too. He does very well play the fact that he's a sort of a neglectful father. He's just very he's kind of a negative version of what's his name? Miles Dyson from Terminator 2. He's very distracted, but he acts like he just his family life is an inconvenience. And he wants to turn Harry into a mini version of him, and Harry doesn't want to do that, and that kind of makes him bitter. And of course, on the other side of the coin, he's very good at playing a psychopathic, maniacal villain in that is the Green Goblin. His voice, his laugh, his physique, which he's surprisingly a pretty sounds weird, a well-shaped guy. Like, I always get confused by Willem Dafoe because he looks so much older than he actually is. But surprisingly, he was pretty, like, his physicality was pretty good for this role. Yeah, he just does a really great job. He knows how to play a good guy and he knows how to play a bad guy, and he does both in this film. But more so, I just think he's way better as a villain. He's got the voice, the physique, the crazy eyes, and the crazy grin. You couldn't have asked a better guy to play Willem Dafoe. I couldn't think of anybody else. Definitely not the version that they had in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Holy fuck, that's bad. I do think he could be a pretty decent Joker.
Yeah.
But if they make a sequel to Joker, I just want Joaquin Phoenix. Yeah. Willem Dafoe is phenomenal as Green Goblin. I almost think it's a little bit of a shame that they kill him off in this movie. He would have been a really good recurring villain. But it sets up the next two movies pretty well. So it's an interesting what if. Pro number 3 is the rest of the cast. I'm not going to say too much about the rest. We have Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane. She's pretty well cast. She looks the part. Admittedly, a big part of that's the red hair. Comic book movies love characters with red hair. There's Medusa in the Inhumans. There's Black Widow. There's Mira in Aquaman. There's Mary Jane. Who else has red hair? I can't think of any others, but there's the main big four
Jean
right
Grey.
there. Jean Grey, yep, there's another one. Thank you. I knew I was missing one. That's probably the biggest one in X-Men. But yeah, Kirsten Dunst does a good job. She looks the part. She acts the part. You definitely believe her chemistry that she has with both Peter and Harry. Not so much with Harry. This recent viewing, I just kind of get the feeling that she dated Harry partially just because out of pity. Like, she kind of felt bad for Harry, so she was like, okay, I guess I'll try dating him. But she never really felt like she actually was genuinely interested in dating Harry. But still, her chemistry when they're just friends is really well done. James Franco is pretty well done as Harry Osborne. There's not much to say about. He gets better in the next two, but there's not much to say about him here. You do, excuse me, by his chemistry with Peter, you can tell these two are best friends. And you can definitely buy that Harry wants to be closer to his dad and he wants to live up to his father's legacy, but the two are just so different. They keep butting heads and they can't find a common ground. But you can tell that Harry wants to be closer to his dad, and James Franco does a really good job pulling that off. Ben and May Parker are well done in this movie. There's not much to say about them. They're just the supportive, loving parents. Nowadays, I can't deny this. These two look old enough to be Peter's grandparents.
Yeah, I mean, especially if he's like a high schooler.
Yeah, right? I know that Lord Hellhound has told me this at one point. He himself has known people that have had uncles and aunts that have been that old, like in their late 50s or early 60s. Sure, but these two don't even look like they're in their late 60s. They look like they're in their 80s almost. But still, Rosemary Harris, excuse me, as May Parker, she's great. She's she looks very loving and warm. And Cliff Robertson does a great job as Ben Parker. He looks the part of, he's not like overly formally educated. He just looks like my grandfather. He knows a lot of street smarts, and he works good with his hands, and he looks like he's a really good a good father figure that'll teach you important skills in life, not just book smarts, but like teaching you how to work with your hands, teaching you how to work in trade skills. Like, that's really good stuff. And Peter's chemistry with Ben, for the little amount of time he's on screen, is great. And his chemistry with Aunt May is very good too. The only other cast member really to talk about is J.K. Simmons as the Jonah Jameson. Fucking asshole motherfucker. But man, is he fun to watch.
Yeah.
Again,
after this movie, I think they realized, like, all right, we gotta hone in on this, because a lot of people like this, because he's not in this movie for that much.
No, he's not. He gets better in the next two films, but still, what he has in this movie is still very, very good. Very similar to Perry White from Superman, but this version, or this character, doubles down even more so on the fact that he's just a Shawnee Boy's right here. So many superheroes nowadays forget to write warm, loving characters into their films. Yeah, he's right. I actually think the last movie to really do that is the next film. Could you pay me in advance?
Oh, God.
Serious? Paying for what? Stand in there? The planetarium tomorrow night, 8:00. There's the door.
Oh my God.
Again.
The third one is ridiculous, with like the pills and the vibrating phone. They're just like, we're just gonna write a comedy scene for him at this point. We don't even give a shit.
Haven't printed retraction in 20 years. So J.K. Simmons does a great job. He definitely fits the part. He's an asshole, but you love to watch him because he's so over the top and he's so funny. You just can't help but love him. Again, there's a lot of elements in this movie that get better in the next two films. And that really is, this isn't really a weakness per se for this, but you can't deny this is kind of a setup film, but it's a good one. Everything that is established here is a really, really good start. I wouldn't say he's the best. He's one of them, though. And he absolutely looks the part, too. He looks like J.K. Simmons, or Jonah Jameson just stepped right out of the comics and the 90s animated series onto screen, played by J.K. Simmons. It's great. Pro number 4 is the humor. Again, more of it's done in later sequels, but still the humor in this movie is really, really good. A lot of it does come down to just clever dialogue and funny dialogue. Like Deadpool, before Deadpool, Spider-Man is definitely a big jokester when he fights his foes. And that's really well established in this movie, mostly in the wrestling match. What are you doing up there? Staying away from you. That's a cute outfit. Did your husband give it to you?
Let mom and dad talk for a minute.
Hey, kiddo, let mom and dad talk for a minute, will ya? It's you who's out, Gabby, out of your mind. What else is there? Cheese.
I think they definitely do more of that in the next couple.
Yeah, they do. Like I said, this is kind of a setup film, but still. Oh, the human spider. Human spider. That's it. That's the best you got. Yeah. Oh, that sucks. And it does suck. Sounds more like Scarlet Spider. Yeah. Overall, the humor is really on point here. It's funny. It doesn't feel like cheesy or stupid. Well, I mean, it is a little stupid, but it's a good kind of stupid. It's just funny, harmless fun. Yeah, right. Not much to say, but yeah, this movie can be pretty funny. And pro number 5 is the origin story. Now I used to think that this was pretty much just a beat for beat recreation of Spider-Man's origin story from the comics. Now, there are a lot of elements of this that do feel very similar to. That's actually one thing that I will give The Amazing Spider-Man is that is a much closer adaptation of Spider-Man's origin story from the comics. But with this version, because they wanted it to be, it is modernized, of course. Obviously, this takes place in 2002, duh. But the origin still does feel very faithful and very close to the original story. Just modernized. That the original story was obviously in the 60s, whereas this is in the early 2000s. But still, it feels close, it feels similar, and it feels faithful to its source material. It doesn't take any huge unnecessary liberties just for the sake of the director wanting to do something different. This just felt like Sam Raimi wanted to take the original Spider-Man story and tell it in an adaptation that takes place in modern days. It's nice, and this was, I think, the first movie to really try to, the first superhero film to really try to stick to its source material out of respect for the original source material, but also out of respect for the fans. Because we don't need movies like Fan4Stick that go out of its way to be as different from the source material as possible just for the sake of being different. Fans of the comics will appreciate that Sam Raimi is obviously a fan. And also, like with Ang Lee's Hulk, that film is pretty similar to Hulk's origin as well. There's differences there, more than this movie, but still it's similar. X-Men does this too. But yeah, I appreciate the origin. It's close to its source material. It is a stickler for the superhero origin story formula, but this was the movie that really cemented that formula, and it's one of the best templates. I think the only other movie that really rivals it, honestly, is the 2005 Fantastic Four. X-Men comes close too, but in terms of like really sticking close to its original source material, Fantastic Four literally is that origin story just told in 2005 instead of 1966.
What about Captain America? First Avenger.
That one works too. That's actually probably the most recent example I can think of that sticks to its source material. Damn, what year was that? 2011?
Yeah.
I need to watch that movie again. Pro number 6. I think, yeah, 6. Or I think, no.
Yeah.
Damn it, I need to start numbering these again.
I think that's 6.
Yeah. The music, done by motherfucking Danny Elfman. Danny Elfman, I would definitely label as one of my top 5 favorite musical composers. He's kind of low, but Danny Elfman definitely has some fucking talent. I think he works best with Tim Burton. Like Danny Elfman and Tim Burton go together like burgers and fries. But yeah, Danny Elfman does a phenomenal job. The Spider-Man theme, one of the most iconic superhero themes of all time. It's instantly recognizable. It's still fucking stuck in my head right now as we're talking about this. It's not really, well, it's like the movie's tone overall. It strikes a very good balance of being not really dark, but a bit more serious, but also a bit campy. But mostly it's whimsical, fantastical, and I've seen Darkman. I like that movie. That movie's got some good music to it too. The score is iconic. It's uplifting. It's just awesome. It just makes you feel good. The music, it really accentuates all the action scenes and emotional moments throughout this movie. It's really, really good. Taking a page out of Trevor Boy's book, pro number 7 is the emotional impact. There's some scenes in this movie that are some really good tear jerkers. But in a good way. Like, obviously, watching Uncle Ben die is heartbreaking. And also watching Norman die, even though he's been a despicable villain for a good chunk of this movie, when he dies, you do get the feel that for a brief moment is Norman's personality coming out and saying, "Don't tell Harry, please." And in that moment, you feel some sympathy for Norman, like he failed his son, kind of, and so you feel some sympathy for him there. And of course, you feel sympathy for Peter, trying to balance being a college guy holding down a job as well as fighting crime, and he struggles to keep Mary Jane and Aunt May and everyone else safe from danger. Again, better done in the next 2 films, but a good start. But overall, yeah, the emotional impact for this is very, very strong. And I think here, or no, it's probably part 3. You feel Uncle Ben's shadow over Peter probably the most here. Actually, yeah, probably the most. Part 3 comes really, really close. But because this is the first film, I think Uncle Ben's shadow is at its biggest here. But it's done good. But yeah, the emotional impact for this movie is really, really strong. There's some good tear-jerking moments. There's some really good uplifting moments. And there's other moments that just make you feel warm and fuzzy inside in a good way. Pro number 8 is the action scenes. Sort of, not really light, but this, of the all 3 Spider-Man films, this probably has the least amount of action. That is a part of that superhero origin story formula, is that they don't really tend to have a whole lot of action scenes. This movie has its fair share, though. They're kind of quick, but they're a fair few. There's Spider-Man's first run going after Uncle Ben's killer. Then there's that montage where he's going around fighting crime when he gets his actual suit.
The burning building.
There's the burning building, and then there's the first time Spider-Man meets Green Goblin. Out am I? Which that's another thing too that I forgot to mention about Green Goblin and Willem Dafoe. Man, does he do a great job with the voice. There's so many iconic lines from
One-liners for sure.
Yeah, lots of one-liners. Like out am I? No one says no to me. My favorite of all, misery, misery, misery. That's what you've chosen. I offered you friendship, and you spat in my face. I've been told by many, many people I do a really good impression of Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin. Kind of wish I had a Green Goblin costume. Though I'd probably have to lose 100 pounds. But yeah, the action scenes. Then there's the third act, really. It's split up between two action scenes. There's the bridge scene, and then there's the fight in the abandoned mansion between Spider-Man and Green Goblin. They're all kind of brief, but they're still exciting and entertaining. Well edited, well choreographed. There's not a whole lot of martial arts choreography with these two, especially Green Goblin. He's more just like a psychopathic brawler. But they play up their strengths. Green Goblin is obviously physically a lot stronger than Spider-Man, but Spider-Man is more agile, which again, they plays up the spider powers very, very well. Yeah, the fight scenes are really good. They definitely also play with Spider-Man's webs really well too. Again, better in the next two films, but still good here. Yeah, the action scenes are a lot of fun. And my last pro is the special effects. The special effects are pretty damn solid. The costumes look great. The Green Goblin suit, even though it's really not very comic accurate, that's probably the biggest departure, honestly, from the source material, is Green Goblin's costume. The glider looks really good, even though it doesn't really look like a flying goblin. It still looks really good. It's really the costume that is so different from the original source material. But they did try to go with a comic accurate design with the original Green Goblin mask. But for whatever reason, that just didn't work. But at least the effort was still there. But still, the Goblin costume they have here, for what they're doing with this movie, it's kind of like Kong's design for King Kong 05. For what they're doing for the film, it works perfectly. Yeah, I like the design. It looks fearsome and menacing, but it also does look practical. And of course, Spider-Man's costume is awesome. Like whenever I think of Spider-Man costumes, this is the one that instantly comes to mind. Oh, of course, yeah. The itsy bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Down came the goblin and took the spider out. There is a lot of green screen effects. There is a lot of CG effects, like whenever Spider-Man's swinging around from his webs, it's a CG recreation. But they're all pretty well done. There's a couple chinks in the armor, which we'll talk about pretty soon. Other than that, all the explosions in this movie look really, really good too. Probably, honestly, the best set that they have. The abandoned mansion at the end of the movie looks really good, but the burning building set looks really, really solid. Yeah, overall, the special effects are phenomenal. And so a lot of people probably know this more nowadays, but when in the cafeteria, when Mary Jane slips in the orange juice and Peter catches her and her food, that was practical. That wasn't an effect. Tobey Maguire actually did catch all that shit with the tray, but they had to redo that scene like 150 times until Tobey Maguire finally got it right. That
It looks good though, so it's probably worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all I have to say. The effects are great. There's not much to say about them, but yeah, they just look great. So with all these great things to say about this great film, do you have any cons?
I do have a couple cons. Actually, piggybacking off what you just said, I'll start with a nitpick. I think some of the effects are.
I have 2 nitpicks and I have 1 full-on con.
Okay, I have 1 nitpick and 2 cons. Yeah, the effects are dated, some of them. And this is mainly I didn't notice as much a problem with the green screen as I did the CG. I think some of the worst of it is when it's that like I think it's the day after he beats up Flash Thompson and he goes outside and he like starts swinging around for the first time. When he's jumping on the buildings, it looks pretty horrendous nowadays. There's just a couple moments of CG that I'm like, I don't know if that holds up. And the reason I kind of criticize that is because, you know, there are movies from around that time that hold up, I think, better. But that's again a nitpick. I think sometimes some of the acting is a little meh, and maybe sometimes that's the dialogue or whatnot. It's like the same thing with like George Lucas movies. It's like, are you gonna blame the actors or his shitty script? You know, it's the same thing. It's like, I think there's a couple moments where I think some things are cheesy, like with Willem Dafoe. It's kind of hard because he's just a maniac. So I think everything kind of works there. But I think some of Tobey Maguire and a little bit of what's his face, James Franco. It's I think it's never not believable, but sometimes I'm like, I get a little sucked out of it. Maybe that's just because of all the memes nowadays too. Sometimes it's hard.
That sadly does not help.
But I think
it's kind of the point where I'm really sick of those memes. I was like, guys, can you just stop making fun of this movie and just enjoy it? Even if some of them are funny, now it's just getting old.
I think my biggest con with the movie, this is a new thing when I watch it this time. I feel like Green Goblin is not a great villain. Like, I think Willem Dafoe plays Harry Osborne well, and I think it works. But I think like his motivation is kind of boring. It's like, join me and we're gonna what? You know, it's like we're gonna have all this power and do bad things or rule the city. It's like very vague to me. It's kind of stupid.
Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, I do kind of agree. It's a little cliche and it's just a little paint by numbers. Just like, oh, join me and we'll rule the galaxy as father and son, something like that.
I think
honestly what really comes to mind is from Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I mean, like for at least for like Harry's character, not Harry, Jesus, Norm's character, like they set him up well. It's like, okay, he got thrown out of his own business, but then he resolves that when he kills all of the board
members.
So
yeah,
he's already kind of resolved his thing. I don't know. I just on this watching, I was like, I offered you friendship. You didn't really offer him anything. You were just like, join me in nothing. I don't know. I mean, other than that, that's really the only like thing that kind of bothered me. Like, they could have done that better. I think Doc Ock was better. And I mean, basically with the exception of Venom, I think Green Goblin's the worst villain in the Raimi series. In terms of character motivation.
Yeah, people are probably going to take that as big words. I have 2 cons and 2 nitpicks and 1 full-on con. We'll start, of course, with the nitpicks. There is some cheesy dialogue in this movie. It's mainly with the love triangle stuff and the high school segments. They come off as being very American Pie-ish. Just those late 90s, early 2000s, like high school, college stoner movies. All the scenes in the beginning just look right out of one of those movies. I think that was a common thing at the time. And
yeah,
I don't really care for that kind of stuff, sadly, because A, it feels dated. but also I just don't really care for that because they're just dime a dozen. And having that bleed into this movie, it just sticks out a little bit like a sore thumb.
Yeah. Some of the bullying stuff I noticed too. It's like it's a little cheese. It's like,
Yeah,
all right,
unfortunately.
Parker, take your picture. I don't know.
It honestly felt just a little forced.
Yeah.
Like the second time someone fucks up Peter taking a photo, Harry's just like, leave him alone. Or what? Or his father will fire your father. What's that
Everyone's so
do?
bratty.
Kill me? Yeah, like seriously. It's just a little out of place if you ask me. But that's something that's just around in movies at the time. Um, you can just ignore it and just push it aside and then just enjoy the movie, which I do myself too. But still, nowadays it does stick out a little bit like a sore thumb. Nitpick number 2, there are some dated green screen and CG effects. Not so much actually with the green screen, though there are a couple shots where like the bridge explosion when a goblin shoots a missile down at the bottom of the bridge, you can kind of tell that's a digitally implemented explosion in a couple shots, and it sticks out a little bit like a sore thumb, but they're quick shots, so you can just ignore them. Um, and yeah, there are some shots when Spider-Man is swinging around where you can clearly tell he's CG. And actually, now that you mention it, yeah, the worst of it is when Peter chases after Ben's killer, especially like when he does Gamera style gymnastics around the flagpole. When he jumps from building to building, you can clearly tell, like, oh yeah, he's CG. When he's crawling up the wall at the beginning of that, because of it being darkly lit, I think that was pretty well hidden.
Yeah.
But then they get really up close and personal, and they light it more so that you can see him more. Then it starts to stick out a little bit. When he's in his regular spider suit, it's fine for the rest of the film, but it's really when he's in his like street clothes spider suit, does the digital stuff come off as a little weak. Not a serious problem though. $139 million was spent on this movie, and they really tried, of course. But it's like with King Kong. No matter how hard you try, there are still going to be some certain elements that aren't going to age very well. And this movie has a couple things that don't age well. My one full con with this film, Spider-Man gets the shit beaten out of him a good chunk of this movie. You can chalk it up to they're trying to say because Peter is new at being Spider-Man, he's kind of inexperienced and new in hand-to-hand combat. Sure, you could chalk that up, but I always like to think that because Peter is a genius, like he has a genius level intellect. If he wanted to learn how to fight, he could pick it up pretty well because of how smart he is. But still, he has these powers to his advantage. He can lift 10 tons. He can jump 40 feet in the air. He can shoot webs like a spider. He has these powers to back him up. But for most of the movie, Green Goblin outclasses him in pretty much every category and kind of wipes the floor with him 90% of the time. Like their first fight, Green Goblin is pretty much just controlling the entire fight the whole time. Peter gets maybe 1 or 2 punches into Green Goblin, and that's about it. The burning building is probably when they're most evenly matched, but especially in the final fight, Green Goblin beats the ever-living fuck out of Spider-Man. Now it's a brutal fight, sure, but still, at least 2/3 of the fight, Green Goblin is just whipping the shit out of Spider-Man, and it just takes a little bit away from Spider-Man see him get his ass beat so much in his debut movie. It's just a little disappointing. Now, Spider-Man does get some good hits in towards Green Goblin. Still, it's a little bit too one-sided for my tastes.
I love that fight.
I love it too.
The best thing about that scene too is like they go like from like okay he saved the kids and he saved Mary Jane and then he's just thrown right into the warehouse and it's like boom it's like the pacing of that is great too and they're just thrown right into it and I also it's kind of like out of nowhere this like extremely maybe unnecessarily brutal fight but it's
No, I wouldn't say it's unnecessary because I think they established that Green Goblin really is not happy with Spider-Man at this point. Still, it's just too one-sided, a little too one-sided for my taste. Not like the end fight of the original Predator, though, but pretty close. That's my only con with this movie. Other than that, this is an awesome flick. So, you got any final thoughts for this movie?
this is a little stupid detail that I noticed this time. It's just interesting to me. Like earlier in the movie, when Peter talked to Mary Jane like outside of like her restaurant, and she was like, "Oh, we can go out to dinner or something," and she's like, "Don't tell Harry." And then at the end, he's like, "Don't tell Harry." I don't know why I thought that was like so clever, but it's something I never noticed in the movie because he's like, "All right, I won't tell Harry," and then it comes back in the end. I thought that was great. I mean, I don't know. I think upon this rewatching, I really appreciate this as an actual movie and not just like popcorn entertainment like I'm a little kid. Um, but it's so hard denying how well this movie is just like there's a lot of feel good in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think unlike a lot of superhero movies nowadays, it's a human movie. It's like a human drama. It's about especially because it is an origin story. It's more about Peter Parker than it is Spider-Man.
Yeah,
I think it's great. Very iconic.
me too. This is still one of my favorite films of all time. Easily one of my favorite superhero films. In hindsight, though, it probably is my least favorite of the Raimi trilogy, but that's not a bad thing. And like I do say, with a lot of franchises that a lot of people hold the first movie in such high regard, I love this film. It's one of my favorites. It's endlessly rewatchable for me. But it's only the first chapter. It's only the beginning. It's the beginning of something great. It's still only the beginning. It's the first part. And admittedly, I like the sequels more because they do more with what this film does. What this film does, though, is still a very, very, very good start. But yeah, this is a great film. It's very well made. You can see the passion. You can see that there's people working on this that really, 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 really wanted to make this as good as possible. And it makes its fans happy, and it makes Joe Schmo audience members happy. It's a great film. It's a great feel-good movie. It's one of the best sticklers for the superhero origin story formula. It's just one of the best superhero films of all time. It's a very damn fine film. And while I'm not going to give it a perfect 10 out of 10, I'm going to give it the closest thing possible, and I'm going to give it a very, very solid 9 out of 10. There is a couple chinks in the armor, and I like things that they do in the sequels more, but what we have here is still very, very, very enjoyable.
So I have a Letterboxd account now, so I like to review things in 5 stars. So I'm gonna do that. You can convert it to 10 if you want to. I would give this movie like personally 5, but trying to like balance how I feel and how I feel about it objectively and like the time period and the context of comic book movies, I'd give it a solid 4, 4 out of 5, so 8 out of 10. I mean, I think
You don't do halves.
I'm not gonna do a half. Um, I think it. I definitely think it like set the precedent for how to do an adaptation. Again, not that X-Men didn't already do it. I don't really love the X-Men films. I gotta be honest. I've never been a fan of those. I love Daredevil, the original Daredevil. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. I love that movie.
Well, I mean, as an adaptation of Daredevil, it does work well, but man, is that movie really trying to rip this movie off.
Hey, I love early 2000s shit, but this movie I have a lot of great memories with. It's like it's amazing how appealing it is to kids, and yet I can watch it now and I'm like, I totally buy this and I'm totally invested in all of it. So I think that speaks to how good of a movie it is. And although this one is the one I have the most memories with, I think objectively, at least the second one's probably better. And rewatching it now, I didn't realize how little Spider-Man action there is in this movie. Even though he quit Spider-Man in the second movie, I feel like there's more Spider-Man in the second one. But I think as the start, as you said, like the beginning of it, I think this film excels.
Well, real quick, I think the X-Men series myself is very, very hit or miss. I think they started out the series really good, and they like the Deadpool stuff. That's kind of its own thing. Logan is a masterpiece, but outside of the first three and Logan, the X-Men series is pretty wildly hit or miss, mostly miss for me, especially after First Class, because I don't like any of the casting decisions for the young X-Men post First Class. But that's neither here nor there. I'll never ever review the X-Men movies. I'll rank them, but I won't review them. Outside of that, so that'll do it for this review of Spider-Man. It's been 20 years since this movie came out, and it definitely still does hold up. Look forward to next week. Only one video this week, where I will be tackling the second and third installments of this trilogy. Hopefully, I'll have Ryan joining me, but if not, I'll have. Huh?
We'll see. I would like to because I kind of want to rewatch 2 and 3 now. So.
I'm really like fighting myself to keep from rewatching 2 and 3. I just might do it anyway. Who cares? Yeah, look forward to that. And as all, Ryan, you got anything to plug?
For Kaiju Network, hell no. Unless there's more significant news about the Godzilla show or the next film that's supposedly filming, nothing. I'm like, this like fucking Call of Duty shit they're doing is like the dumbest garbage I've ever seen.
I know Sean is really interested, but I really could not do shits about that.
Some of the, like the game footage, like the CGI stuff with Godzilla and Kong is cool, but like it's just like a fucking skin. Like
I couldn't care less.
They need to release something. They need to release a new game, is what they need to do. But
yeah,
shit. As for that, I'm not. The channel is not going to be active unless some news happens. And my personal channel, go check that out. It's called Smittenator. I comment on this channel with that sometimes. I have my final project is out. It's like a little short film, so you can check that out.
And look forward to me reviewing the rest of this trilogy next week. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. And as always, remember, with great power comes great responsibility. And I will see you guys in the next video.